I'm calling this meeting of the Charter Review Commission to order. Welcome committee members, staff, and audience to the meeting. The first item on the agenda will be the approval of minutes from December 9th, 2015. They have been circulated. Are there any amendments to the minutes dated December 9th?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 3 on the agenda is old business. And it was Article 7, 7.02A1. And there is a draft that has been suggested, that has been drafted, that inserts the words okay, to add sexual orientation on that. Oh, we're going to see that on the ballot, aren't we? There we go. Is there any public input on this item? Any discussion as to how that was drafted? The insertion of those two words?
Mr. Chairman, I would not have any concerns with how it was drafted. I would have concerns with adopting this. I'd be interested in hearing from Mr. Fifley and the City Attorney's Office on the implications. I think that any time you add a protected class like this to any kind of ordinance or statute, it always does open up the risk of potential litigation and one more class of distinction for litigation. But if the City Attorney's Office has no concerns along those lines, then I suppose it's not a huge change. But then I'd also be interested in knowing from the City Attorney what current protections are under state law, and would this be different from how state law protects or defines protected classes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer the question, first of all, SDCL 20-13-10 is the state law equivalent in terms of protected classes, and that does not include sexual orientation. As you're probably aware, Mr. Smith, there was an effort, I believe, last legislative session to add sexual orientation to those protected classes on the state level, and that was defeated at the legislative level. However, on the city level, as I had mentioned last time, our executive order prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation among other protected classes. And then also Ordinance 39.042 also lists sexual orientation as a prohibited classification for discrimination for the civil service. And then our office does do Federal Employment Practices Agency work, and the EEOC tells us that sexual orientation claims are included under gender or sex discrimination already. So we have been following the EEOC directives under federal law in that that is a prohibited classification. So for all practical purposes, Mr. Smith, to answer your question, this would not make any difference in terms of how we operate and in terms of what prohibited classifications are already in place. For the Commission's education as well, the 8th edition of the Model Charter lists sexual orientation. It includes that in this provision. So I would commend Pauline Politis for catching that yes, this is one from the 8th edition of the Charter. If I was remiss when I put this out in terms of a suggested drafting. I would also request is if we are going to have this as a proposal on the ballot that we change the word handicap to disability to more accurately reflect the more modern nomenclature on how that is referred to.
Would that be consistent with the 8th edition as well?
Yes, it would be, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's said disability rather than handicap under the 8th edition as well.
Any discussion on then also replacing handicap with disability? Is there any objection to having that? Okay.
Mr. Chair, do you need a motion?
We do. Is there a motion to include the proposed language that would include both of those changes?
So moved.
I second.
We have a motion and a second so that sexual orientation would be added and handicap would be replaced with disability. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
May I just ask who made the second?
Ollie.
Okay, thank you.
On new business, we have the charter election official ballot. And as I look through that, so the way this is drafted, Amendment A would be to that if it's 2 years or less, it doesn't count for city council election. Mayor, Amendment B would take out the language, the obsolete language from city pension system. C would change the years being listed to every 20 years pursuant to state law. D would give that same item with the mayor. And E would be that all department heads would be subject versus the 5%. And I think then the other item is that if there would be an F for the language that went today, would be a change. So any discussion? Justin?
Mr. Chair, are you looking for a motion?
A motion to, I think, adopt the ballot. Okay. Before we do that one, but my understanding is we'd be looking at the ballot with E with F added for the sexual orientation and in the other change to disability. Any public input? Okay. Hearing none.
Mr. Chair, I would move that the Charter Revision Commission adopt the official ballot stated here with the addition that you have mentioned.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second, and that would be A through F, with F being the change that we voted on earlier today. Discussion? How does 6 ballot measures compared to what has been on in the past?
I hate to generalize, but that'd probably be a little bit more than average, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of what the voters have seen in the past. We've had a couple of years where I think we had 5 or 6, so.
Okay. But now the process is going to be, this is going to be, after we do it, it will go to the city council to say which ones.
This is a report that's given to the city clerk, and then it's placed on the ballot for
Okay, so
April.
it'll go from here to the ballot.
Correct. And it's up to the voters.
I guess to me, the only item would be that if there would be one of these that wouldn't go on, would probably be B, because it's just taking out language that refers to the pension that doesn't exist. It helps clarify, but it doesn't change any substance. And I guess the question be is if we'd want to do 5 versus 6, is if there's any thoughts on that.
Mr. Chair, I think that isn't the only one that's kind of cleanup language, and so it's not a difficult ballot for the voters, and I think it shows that we've done our due diligence and taken care of the business that needs to be taken care of. So I have no problem with all 6.
Any further discussion? Hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, and that may the record reflect that that was unanimous. With that, we will need to schedule one more meeting, and the agenda for that meeting will be to approve the minutes of this meeting.
You have to vote on this one. Vote on that one.
And this one. My apologies, there is one more item. Didn't read my agenda correctly here. So on this one, today is the Charter Revision Commission draft ballot and summary report. It has been circulated, the 3 pages.
Mr. Chairman, with the understanding that the City Attorney's Office will revise this to include a brief summary of item F, I would move to approve the Charter Revision Commission summary report for the 2016 ballot.
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Is there any public input? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Let the record reflect that that was unanimous on that one. I think we have already voted on the ballot. Council report.
Yep.
We have those two. Okay. Is there any additional public input at this time? Okay. Hearing none. The last item is to set a meeting date to approve the minutes of this meeting. And at that point, I think this section of work will be completed. Is there a time that will work for people? And would that be since it's a fairly brief meeting, if there are those that are out of town with telephone, they could call in?
Absolutely.
And about how much time is it going to take before the minutes will be ready?
Oh,
Probably a day or 2.
Okay. So is there a time coming up that would work well? I would think sometime after next week or after next Tuesday or Wednesday.
Mr. Chair,
When after next Wednesday.
Beginning on Tuesday of next week, I'll be fairly tied up in Pier, but I have no problem if the revision commission would like to meet without me.
Would it be able for you to call in for the 1-minute meeting?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And there's a comment. How does next week work?
After, anytime after Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so the 14th, the 14th?
Thursday, the 14th.
so would Thursday the 14th work for people?
If we kept it at 4?
Four o'clock on the 14th would work for me.
I have another board meeting. At
Is there-
4 o'clock on the 14th, I have an Arboretum board meeting, but, so I can't even call in. But if you don't
Is
need
that,
my,
is that near here?
yeah, it's down at Shrapa Place.
Okay, so
Yeah,
what if
3
we did could we do a 3:30 meeting?
That would work fine, because
3:30?
I'll have to be downtown anyway.
3:30 on the 14th? Would we have a meeting space available?
I don't have access to that. The drawer's gone, but
You want me to run and check in there just to make sure before we?
Well,
I think we're fine on Thursdays. The only thing would be, I think we're fine, but
Okay.
I could let you know tomorrow morning right away.
So for tentatively, we'll look at 3:30 on the 14th. And I think it should be a fairly brief meeting.
I think, didn't we do 2 minutes last time with
But you were able to stretch it out.
that?
So
We'll try and beat that record.
before we do that, I just want to say thank you for everyone for how well this process worked. When the staff, as far as getting the reports out and everything else that is done there, for our members, I want to thank each of you for your diligence. And I think the structure worked for us. That was, Member Politis, that was the example you set for us last time. You did great leadership on that. We appreciate it. I think it worked out well. Is anything that any of you would like to say? With that, we stand adjourned.